Hey guys, what's up? It is Ripe again, back with more Entitled People. If you enjoyed these story compilations, please don't forget to tell me in the comments, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, "Oh, you're close with the boss? I am too." Back in around 2000 to 2002, my dad and a friend of his started a company. They put in the grueling and overwhelming amount of work necessary for it to have grown exponentially over the last 20 years. A couple years ago they had an opening for a technical editor and my dad offered me the position. I would just like to say that I am so unbelievably grateful for this, and I always will be, and I'm very mindful of the fact that I have to tread lightly sometimes. Every year during the holiday season, they, like most businesses, throw a holiday party. They have several around the country, so every office has one, but the main one is where corporate is headquartered. The first year I attended the party, nobody knew who I was. I tend to not share who I am related to for obvious reasons, unless somebody asks. It is not a secret by any means, but it is not something that I shout from the rooftops. Anyways, the bar opened an hour before the party technically started, and since it is an open bar, a few people were already quite a few drinks in. I went up to get a drink and somebody, whom I've never met, introduced himself to me in a pretty rude and arrogant way. I am talking,
"You probably already know who I am, but if you don't, you should. I am Holden."
Fake name. He was clearly pretty drunk, but it is a party and I did not blame him. I shook his hand and tried to walk away, but he wouldn't stop talking about how important he was to the company. I smiled and nodded and ah'd for quite a while, even as he spilled his drinks on me from gesturing wildly. Eventually he told me,
"I am also really close with the president."
This interested me quite a bit, because that was my dad and I had literally never heard this person's name. Not a problem though, because I did not know all his friends. But this dude kept going. Here's how that conversation went. H:
"Yeah, you could pretty much call us family friends."
Me: "Really? You know his family?" H:
"Oh yeah, of course. We've all gotten together a few times. His kids love me."
Me: "Wow, that's pretty cool." I was not planning on saying anything because he was drunk and it did not really matter to me. However, he then turns around and says,
"Okay, well, I have more interesting people to talk to now,"
and walked away. I was livid. First of all, you spilled your crappy dirty martinis all over me, so I smelled like olives. You were kind of a dick from the get-go. You waste 30 minutes bragging about yourself and then you tell me I'm uninteresting? So I waited until the perfect moment when the party had started to taper off a bit. Our homebody Holden was still there, even more drunk than he was before. He eventually made his way over to my dad and my mom, chatting them up and whatnot. I sidle over to the group and he gives me a stink eye, probably thinking that I'm trying to cozy up to them too. The look of horror on his face when my dad hugs me and kisses me on the cheek and says, "Hey honey, your brother is coming to pick us up. Do you need a ride?" was indescribable. It was a combination of,
"I think I just crapped my pants,"
and
"I'm going to yeet myself out this window immediately."
it was genuinely one of the best small revenges of my life. In case anybody wonders, him and I laugh about the incident now, and it is not a big deal. It is a funny story that I like to tell. I would also like to say that I hope I don't come across as entitled or bratty. Like I said, I am so grateful for the opportunity that I was handed, and I work very hard to prove my worth. And guys, even though I am not good at this, but this could be one of the reasons why it might be a smart choice to be nice to all your coworkers. How is it for you, by the way? Are you good at playing nice, so to say, even though you don't like a person? I think I've mentioned in the past that I'm not really good at that. If I don't like someone, then I will probably let him know, but I know that is maybe not a very good character trait. And the next one is titled, "Played music loudly at a doctor's office? Two can play this game." This literally just happened. I am sitting in the parking lot with my two younger kids while my wife has my eldest daughter inside for her appointment, when an SUV pulls up in the spot next to me. Cool, no problem. I went on scrolling through Reddit and then he starts playing music excessively loud with excessive bass. You know how it goes. Now, my sound system is not anything special, but it does the job. Onto the revenge. I roll up all my windows except the one pointed at his car and then max my volume, plug in my aux cord and then I blast Aqua Baby Girl at him. I let it run for 20 seconds and then turned it down and he turned his off. Worth it. And the next one is titled, Lazy Worthless Coworker is Now Unemployed. Several years ago I had a coworker who was absolutely worthless. She called in sick at least every other week with some malady, was always out running around chatting and socializing instead of working, and just generally leaving the rest of us to fill in for her. Another coworker, who I will refer to as Fed Up, were really sick of dealing with her because we were the ones expected to take her calls and take care of her customers when she was out or away from her desk. I had complained loudly and often to my manager to no avail. For some reason she took it as if I were challenging her authority, rather than believing I had a legitimate complaint. One day, she basically told me she was sick of hearing about it, I obviously had a personality conflict and to drop it or else. Well, I dropped it, but I was pissed. Finally, one week everything came to a head. Worthless handled one of our large clients and we were getting a lot of calls from their customers. So many in fact that my supervisor told me and Fed Up that we needed to help Worthless because she could not possibly handle all the calls. I was livid. Maybe if she spent her time at her desk instead of running all over the office, she could handle the calls. Anyway, I did what I was told, but I fumed the whole time. Worthless was also in the habit of leaving early every day. At about 20 minutes to closing, she would shut down her computer and go sit in another coworker's office and blab for 10 minutes, and then they would leave together while I was still working. One afternoon after she left, I still had about 10 of her unanswered calls, so I sent them back to her desk. I figured if she had time to leave early, she had time to return her own calls. Well, apparently the next day, Worthless tattled to the boss because she came to see me about the phone calls. I'd had it. I told my boss exactly what happened and why I sent the calls back. I guess this time she agreed with me because we did not have to help her with calls anymore. The whole time this was going on, Worthless was complaining non-stop about this client. She was so pissed about having to take all these calls and griped all the time. Well, she decided to vent on Facebook and, idiot that she is, made disparaging comments about one of our biggest clients online. And as if that is not bad enough, she was friends with at least 20 coworkers, all of whom saw her rant. Most of them were friends and Facebook name only, because in reality very few people could stand her. So one of her friends screenshotted the page, printed it out and gave it to Fed Up. We then mailed the screenshot of her rant to the HR manager from outside the office and sat back and waited. 2 days later, Worthless was escorted from the office. Rumor has it that HR had her termination paperwork ready before they even called her in. And once again guys, that is why you don't mess with your coworkers. In the end, I guess it is better to make friends than to make enemies. And by the way, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you enjoy my content. Thank you so much in advance. And the next one is titled, Make My Life at Work Miserable? You will never work again with me. I used to work at a medium-sized IT services company and had recently been moved to a smaller branch office with a nice pay raise. I was basically my own team and got to do interesting work on a large project. Since they were satisfied with the work but needed it done in a larger scale, the company hired another person to help me. Meet Fred. I knew Fred from outside work through common relationships and I didn't find him any weirder than other nerdy people in the business, but oh boy. Fred was good at technical work, very good. When it came to human interactions though, it was something else. Fred thought of me as his only friend in the workplace and would complain all day long about all other colleagues who were all equally incompetent, weird, evil and generally deserving of his scorn. Fred had a terrible tendency of telling other people we had to work with that they were doing things wrong and that their software was crap. Which was often technically right, but completely forgetting the constraints in which other people had to work and that there might have been reasons for things that now sounded awful, which is basically always the case in IT. People resented both of us as a team for things he said, and some situations became entrenched. It was getting harder every day for me to get to work. Eventually he made a lot of enemies and he got a meeting with the division director. It only lasted for a few minutes, during which he told the boss of 800 people that he was an evildoer. It was his last day in the company. I worked alone from that time and managed to finish most of the project, smoothing things over with other teams. A few months later, I got an offer for the job of my dreams in a huge utility company. After starting the work, guess who I discover working right here as a contractor under my direct supervision? Fred. Fred looked so happy to find a friend again. He spent most of my first day at work telling me how the company was awful, everyone was dumb, and everything was insufferable. I went home that night feeling horrible, wondering how much of what he told me was true and how bad it would be to work there. Turns out, after a few hard starting days, it really was the job of my dreams. Acting now with Fred as a client and not a colleague, I managed to keep him in check and to improve a lot of the perceived quality of the team's work. Prior to my hiring, Fred was basically telling people to F off whenever they were asking him things he didn't want to work on. Having someone who could see through his bullcrap to manage him got the roadmap back on track. Eventually I learned that my colleagues had been very wary about working with me at the beginning because Fred had been bad-mouthing me from the day he learned that I had been hired to manage him. This had made the first weeks difficult until they understood that he had been lying about it all. About 2 years later, I was now team manager and my boss comes in my office and asks me about a hiring issue. There's a new position in the team and the recruiter asked him about someone with excellent technical skills but who sounded very arrogant. Guess who wanted to work as my colleague again? If you have followed the story, you've got it right. I did not let out to my boss the slightest bit of resentment. I explained him how he was a very competent person, but that he might just lack a bit of the skills required for our company's teamwork. I knew exactly what I had to say for my boss to never want to hire him ever without making it about our personal history. I only told what happened to a close coworker and he sounded very thankful to hear that he would not have to work with Fred as a colleague. A few months later his company lost a contract and Fred was hired by the new contractor. However, they were not as lenient with him as the previous company was, and another few months later I was finally Fred free. Last I heard of him, he was working at a Silicon Valley giant on a project that was in a worldwide media crapstorm over technical issues. I keep wondering whether he was telling everyone else in his team how bad at their job they were and how much he contributed to that massive failure. And by the way guys, I know there are a lot of TV shows about the daily office life, so to say, and I'm wondering which one is your favorite? Probably one of my favorites, even though it is not really about classic office work, is the TV show Silicon Valley. It's essentially a comedy TV show about a small startup in Silicon Valley and the characters in there are really goofy, so I would really suggest you to watch that if you are interested in topics like that. In addition, that reminds me, there was a series that I maybe watched 1 or 2 years ago and unfortunately I never finished, about the beginnings of the personal computer in Silicon Valley, starting with IBM and all that other good stuff. I think it was on Amazon Prime, but I unfortunately really don't remember. Either way, let's move on to the next one. And the next one is titled, Some Mothers Do Have Them, or The Night a Burglar Stuffed Up. Posted by user Captain Dropbear in our own subreddit r/ripe stories. Well, Ripe fans, I have a story from when I was an apprentice glazer I thought you might like. So on with the story. I used to work nights for a glass company where I would listen to the police scanner and chase any incidents that involved smash and grabs and secure the property for the police/owner. One night at 2 AM, I parked up at the top of a hillside park chatting with the local senior sergeant, let's call him Bulldog, a big gruff teddy bear of a man you do not mess with. So, Bulldog's radio goes off, there is a reported break-in at the local convenience store. So, we both race to that location. On the way, Bulldog sees a young kid of 15 walking away from the shopping area, he stops to talk to him and I continue to shop. Confirmed the glass door has been kicked in, I stay in my UTE as I know Dog Squad are on their way. They arrive and I head back to see Bulldog, so not to contaminate the site. Bulldog is still chatting with the young guy. I pull up, hop out and say to Bulldog, confirmed break-in, senior glass door, looks like some good fingerprints as well. The young guy, without missing a beat, shouts at Bulldog, "You ain't got my prints, I was wearing gloves." Both me and Bulldog look like stunned mullets for a second or two and bursts out laughing, and Bulldog arrests him and puts him in the back of his car. Few minutes later we see the police dog running our way with handler close behind him with a bag full of cigarettes and alcohol. Confirmed and then double confirmed, bag had young guy's name written on it. Some mothers do have them. 4 months after every time we would meet at a burglary, he would say, "Any prints, young fella?" I would reply, "You ain't got my prints, I'm wearing gloves." And the last one is also from the awesome Captain Dropbear, and it is titled, "This is either a revenge or I am an a-hole story." Well, my fellow Ripe family, I had an interesting day, so as title suggests, I had a bad day at work and not sure if it was petty revenge or just me being a cantankerous Dropbear. So our day starts with doubling the time it takes me to get to work due to having to pass through multiple mini wannabe Gestapo checkpoints, show me your papers, where you going, etc. Corona checkpoints. Internal monologue is playing. Hello, I am in a company vehicle covered in sign writing. I am wearing a branded company uniform. So I arrive 1 hour late to the first job customer. It is fine as I called and let them know we would be late. Quick R&D of old screens / measure. Set up truck to start making new screens. As soon as I start up my truck, I saw a wild Karen appear on an overhead balcony at the apartment block I was working at.
Excuse me? Hello, excuse me. You cannot do that. I'm trying to work from home and I'm on the phone. Hello, excuse me.
Yes, I heard her, but pretended not to as I was wearing hearing protection. Karen actually throws water at me, so I stopped and removed the earmuffs, shout, "What the heck, lady? Are you insane?" Karen starts up again with her Karen talk, "You cannot do that, I'm working from home, blah blah blah." I shout back as I am pissed off and said, "Do you want a $10,000 fine for you and a $100,000 fine for the company you work for from WorkSafe? Don't ever interfere with a tradesman going about their business. Now bugger off or I will call them and the police and have you arrested." I then put my hearing protection back on and only cut frame for 1 panel. Then cut glass and framed it up. 50 minutes later I start up the saw again. Again only cutting frame for 1 panel. Rinse and repeat cycle for 2 more panels and 2 doors and framing. Each time Karen comes out on the balcony, gives me a very poor attempt at Mama Son's the look. Love you Mama Son, my big sister from another mother. Then I went and did installation. Normally I would stack old screen on the side of the truck and pull it apart back at the factory. But oh no, not this time. I stripped off the old frame, stacked all the old glass. Then I proceeded to start up the saw again and cut all the frame up onto 100mm length, 1 piece at a time. The entire time Karen is out on her balcony screaming. I finish, leave the hearing protection on, close up truck, hop in and start to leave. As I do so, I select a song from a band called Alley Storm about doing something with an anchor on full volume. I can only imagine Karen had a shocked Pikachu face as she heard it. So guys, what would you say? Is Mr. Captain Dropbear the a-hole in this story or not? I would probably say you are the a-hole, but it was still a very satisfying story. And then again, you did it to a Karen, so I think it is okay. Either way guys, I would just like to remind you once again, if you have any epic stories to share, please head over to r/ripe stories on Reddit. And by the way, in order to post you need to make an account, but you can essentially put any fake email you want because you don't need to verify the email in order to post stories on my subreddit. Of course, it would be very nice if you could check the grammar and make sure that it is formatted all right. That makes it much easier for me to read the story and more likely that I will read it out in a video. Either way, I really love hearing these stories from you guys, so thank you very much for all the people that still post stories on r/ripe stories. Either way, I hope you have a fantastic day and I see you again tomorrow.